And I don't know if you remember, but I texted you during that time. I said, Becky, does this make sense? And you didn't give me a yes or a no. I think you did say, does this align with your goals? What I really want to get into, I think honestly, is private money lending, just because I realized that my time is super important. And even though I know you make a little bit less back, I think.
What does it feel like to get your very first rental property? That is what we're going to be talking about today with Danielle. Danielle, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining me. I know we've talked about having a little bit of a recording of an episode for you on your first property for such a long time. And I'm glad that we were able to sit down and get a time on the calendar to go through this. I know a lot about you, but why don't you take a second and just introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, so my name's Danielle. I used to live in New York, which is where I met Becky, and we can go into that. But now I live in Boston. I actually moved out this way. I'm from here originally, but I was having kind of trouble getting a property out in New York. So I moved back out this way so I could get my first property. I have a little 4-year-old named Naya. And yeah, I mean, here I do a lot of volunteer work. I work for a book publishing company and a company that franchises small businesses. So I kind of have my hands in a few different pots, but yeah.
Good. And for those watching on YouTube, you might also recognize Danielle. She was a community manager with Lady Landlords for a very, very long time. So some of you also might recognize either her name on the episode or her picture here on YouTube. So she's been somebody that has supported Lady Landlords and me outside of the actual community for years. So Danielle, really want to be able to thank you for that too.
Yeah.
I always like to ask, where or why did real estate even pop up for you? You were living in New York City, you were working full time. Why was this even a thing that you considered?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I found real estate about 4 years ago. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, so I guess 5 years ago now. And yeah, I found I was going to raise her myself. I was working at a nonprofit at the time where, it's great work, but unfortunately you don't make a ton of money. And so when I realized I was going to raise her myself, I didn't really know how I was going to support her, and not just like in the time, but going forward, And so I remember I went to the Barnes and Noble section and I went to the finance investing section, and I found a book by Bigger Pockets. So I started reading a lot of books, and then I worked my way into the podcast of Bigger Pockets. And then from there, that's actually how I found you, Becky. And so I heard you on one of the podcasts, and I was like, she lives in New York. How does she invest in New York? And so when you were talking about the Bronx and, the boroughs, not just like upstate New York and things like that. So I started following you on Facebook, and yeah, I don't know. I really just started listening to like a ton of podcasts. Then I started listening to your podcast, of course, and I really just started studying everything. And yeah, that's kind of what I would say what interested me the most. And I understood real estate. I tried figuring out stocks and all that stuff, but I couldn't like wrap my head around it, Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what brought me into real estate. And yeah.
I love that because I feel like people don't utilize bookstores mm-hmm. as much as they used to. And that has like really changed the past 5 years of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what your life would have been like if you did pick up like a book on a completely different topic mm-hmm. than real estate investing. I wonder what that would look like instead.
I know. Well, I did try a couple of different approaches to investing, but I'll tell you, I think it was finding people that were relatable like you, who were kind of doing things that I wanted to do and where I wanted to do them. And I was like, oh, it's possible, So yeah. It was nice having people I felt like I could really look up to for it.
Well, I know even from the beginning of when we first met, like one thing that we always really had in common was the idea of traveling. Mm-hmm. And being able to live in different places and be able to, I think that was, if I think back to like one of the first times that we'd really talked or met, I think that was part of a plan that like you were even going to buy, I think it was like a short-term rental with like a friend mm-hmm. down in Florida, if I remember correctly. So that way, like you could still like live there. And then that would be something that would be like at least a jumping off pad or a place that you would be able to go to. But I remember that it was and I loved that. And that actually was something that inspired me, that you as a mom were saying, how can I take my daughter to all these different places?
Mhm.
So I'm also going to come back to that because you guys have done some really, really cool traveling.
Yeah.
But so here you are in learning phase, right? You've read Bigger Pockets. Now you joined Lady Landlords. You are in that information knowledge collection zone,
Mhm.
but that wasn't moving you forward. That wasn't having you do anything from that point. What had you say, like, hey, I need to figure out how to actually put steps into place and take action rather than just go back to Barnes and Noble and pick up another book?
Yeah, I was stuck in that learning phase for a really long time because I felt like I needed to know everything, especially where I wasn't making enough money, right? Like I had some savings, but day to day, like I was going through it. So I was kind of I was like, I can't spend my money on something if I'm not 1,000% sure of it. And then I got to a point where I remember this day, I was sitting on my sofa in New York and I was scrolling through Facebook and I was feeling a little frustrated. And I actually scrolled up and one of your posts from Lady Landlords came up on my Facebook and it was about one of your meetings up in Yonkers.
Yep.
And it was an in-person meeting. And I said to myself, I was like, man, you've been feeling stuck for so long. Like it's time to do something and take some sort of action, no matter what that step was. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go to this. And I felt a little awkward, right? Because here I am renting a property. I didn't own any properties. So I definitely felt a little bit like intimidated. But yeah, it was a 2-hour train ride to get up there. So I had to call Naya's sitter and have her come. And I mean, all in all, that's like 6 hours. So I think, so instead of actually paying her to come for the day while I was working, I paid her to come at night instead. So I kind of sacrificed a little bit of like my work hours. Not that I didn't work, I still did. It was just harder because I had her with me. And then I took the train out there and I did that a few times for the next, I think, couple of months that you had it. And I was like, wow, this is great. I met some really amazing women who were doing all sorts of different things. They were at all different phases of their real estate career. So I think it just got me a little bit more motivated and like, all right, I can do this, you know? And then I think my major turning point was when, do you remember you had to stop posting the meetings for a minute because everything in your portfolio and I think just in your life was really chaotic. And I emailed you and I was like, Becky, you're not having the meeting? Like I was, because I had just got so involved with it, you know, and you were like, no, I've got too much going on. I had this rental property I have to fix up. And I was like, let me come in and help you. And so you were like, it's pretty far. Like, are you sure you want to come? And I was like, I'll do it. I didn't even know how far it was. I'm not going to lie. When you gave me the address, I looked it up. And I think this is kind of like one of like the key pieces to almost like my whole real estate investing is I looked it up. I looked up how much it would cost me to rent a car. I'm not going to harp on this too much, but again, I wasn't even making enough money right at the time. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. But I knew like me paying Naya's sitter to come up, because remember I took her up there with me. I rented a car, so I had to go to JFK, pick up a car, then drive out to Cornwall, and then come back down. So the whole day, I don't even think I ever told you this, but it cost me like probably $500 for me to come out there.
No, you never did that. No, you didn't.
And I said to myself, I was like, okay, I can take this and I can make an investment in myself. And I knew it would be worth it. And I think that is the day I think you and I connected so much. Yeah. And it just, I don't know, it just kind of escalated everything, you know, from that point on. So I think that was a big turning point. But yeah, that's kind of where things started like propelling for me.
Okay. We're going to break down. There were a couple things that you did in there that I want to make sure that you highlight, right? Mm-hmm. First off, you came out of your comfort zone and came to a meetup, right? Very, very cool to be able to come. And once again, you were in Brooklyn. Now, for anybody that is listening to this, that is outside of like the New York, like boroughs, like going from one borough to another borough is like a crazy thing to do that we do not do. Also, changing certain subways, or then now Danielle had to take a commuter train to get to where this meetup was. It wasn't even on the subway line anymore. That is a huge thing for somebody that lives in New York City. We do not do that. I also remember that you were coming to some of the regular meetups, but then you also missed, I did like a larger event over the summer. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if it was you or Naya that got sick, but you weren't able to come to that. I remember you were so heartbroken because that was one of the larger events. So, but you then were coming to the events, meeting some other women, really connecting with them. That is incredibly important. And everybody has to start somewhere. So I'm really proud that even though you were like, well, I'm just renting, I don't own property, that you still came. What was it like just talking to some of those other women? And, you know, as people were saying, like, did you feel like intimidated by everybody being like, oh, I own all these rentals and I make all this money? Or do you feel like there were other people that were like, I'm just trying to figure this out too, or like, I own one, I own two? Did you feel that there was diversity, or did you feel that you were just kind of small fish in big pond?
No, there was a ton of diversity within it. And I think that's what was cool. So it was nice meeting some other people who didn't own any properties and were just getting started like me, or they might have owned, one or two. But honestly, it's so funny because when I went to the meeting, I thought I would have gravitated and probably stuck toward the people who were more like one or two properties at the time. But instead, I really gravitated toward the people who own more properties. And I think it's because of how open they were. Like the community is really, I don't know, it's just like everybody wants to help each other, which I think is something that's really cool. And I don't think I expected that.
Good. And I ask those questions because I get that it is intimidating. It is hard to walk into a room. You don't know anybody. You have to make conversation. You have to figure out kind of where your place is with some of those people. And that could be really kind of scary for some people. I also mention that because in 2026, we are bringing back in-person meetups.
I'll be
and
there.
I'm very
From Boston.
Well, I was going to say, for any of our listeners out there, if you would like the Lady Landlords tour to come to your city, put that city down in the chat so I can start collecting up some of those locations. So Danielle, it looks like Boston's going to have to be on there. And we've talked about this for a long time, but I'm also going to be doing a meetup in the Dominican Republic. So you also need to get Naya and come on down to DR finally.
Yep.
So we'll talk more about that later. But ladies, that is something that we will be doing in 2026. So keep an eye on, like I said, drop a city, a location of where you are down in the show notes. So that way I can start kind of compiling some locations that we have members that we would like to be able to visit. But that was great to kind of start to network, kind of get to know like your people there. When you offered to come up and help with the property that I was renting, that changed a lot of things for me, right? I had other people over the years like reach out and be like, cool, like I'll do anything for you. And I'm like, I don't really know what I need. Like, what do you mean? Like, oh, can I they just weren't like clear with what it was. And it was really hard for me to be like, I'm managing things pretty well. Like, I don't really know what I need. Like that just didn't help. And I wanted to pay that forward, and I was happy to help be able to mentor. But I love that you came and were like, hey, I saw that you have to go up and work on this rental property. Let me come up and I'll help you. And I think I remember saying back to you too, I'm like, I think the number one thing I have to do is wash walls.
That's what we
do. You want to wash walls? And you were like, yeah, I can do that. And I was like, okay, if you want to wash walls, that sounds good to me. And that was something that really cut down on my time. But I have to say it was one of the smartest things I think anybody that I've ever met has ever done. Because what ended up happening that day? You came up that day. Yes, you met me. Yes, I understand that there was a financial commitment. Yes, you brought your babysitter with you and Naya with you, and you rented the car, and that was a very, very long day for you. But we talked the entire time. Yeah. We washed walls, right? And I felt like I was sitting there, and I remember like, as I'm scrubbing down, wall number 4, I was like, this was so freaking smart of her. She's going to ask me anything. She could pick my brain. I am trapped because I still have another 9 walls to go wash, but like, here we are for that. So, and then I do remember, I'll never forget, after we got the apartment ready, because the apartment was pretty much turnkey, but we really just had to get it prepped, and I was doing an open house the following week. So that's why I loved the help of being able to do that. Mm-hmm. But then I also remember we went to lunch at the end of the day, and I tried to go to the bathroom and go pay for lunch, and you had actually already paid. Yeah. And and like the waitress or the hostess was just like, no, sorry. The girl that you're sitting with, when she came to the bathroom, she gave me her credit card. Yeah. So she tried to pay before you. And I was like, no, but like, that was something that I wanted to do to thank you. Mm-hmm. But I recognize that you had done that to also thank me. But that, to me, one, it was incredibly helpful. And I want to point this out for anybody else that is also looking or can help somebody that is farther along than them in real estate. Offer to do something that's useful. What Danielle did was gave me a very clear, specific thing. What address do I need to be at? Cool, I can come. I saw you have to prep a house. I'll come clean. great. That made my life easy. And I feel horrible that you had to go and pick up a rental car. And I know you, Claire, had to deal with the car seat with Naya and going to JFK. Nobody likes to do, especially when you're not getting on a plane. But I also loved that you made my life so easy with being like, cool, what time are you starting? I'll be there. And you had to then figure out how to get up there, what time to leave, how to get a car, whatever that looked like, how to take, I think at one point you did probably look into taking trains up there. But an hour and a half north of New York City, trains start to get a little limited, especially in the area where that particular property was. But that just, I thought that was the smartest thing I think that I've had anybody that I've ever met do, because I was just like, that was so smart. I'm now trapped in this room and I get to answer all of her questions for her. And I thought it was great. Yeah. But I'm glad that that was like a turning point. Do you remember, was there any specific like takeaway that you got from that day, or anything that made you say like after that day, like, okay, now I'm ready to go?
I think it was almost being in the property itself and just kind of seeing like a real, because you always hear people talking about these rental properties, right? And how they own this many. But I think physically being there and kind of seeing, you were getting the stairs remodeled at the time. So I think just seeing like the real work that goes into it. And it was so funny to me how you own so many properties, yet you were still there scrubbing the walls, right? So I think it was just like, that was kind of the major thing. And it felt so cool just kind of being there and being like, well, this is real. Like, it's a tangible thing, I think that was a big part of it.
Right. Now, 9 months pregnant, would probably outsource cleaning walls. Yeah, I will say that. But I feel like also at that time, and I think that property was maybe like my 10th door or somewhere in there. One, it was still a way of keeping costs down. And two, that property was actually supposed to be turnkey. There were supposed to be tenants in both those units. But there was miscommunication about the sale of the house, and the tenant in that upstairs apartment that we cleaned ended up moving out like a few days before closing. So now all of a sudden I was left with a vacancy. When you don't have tenants in place, I felt like it was really important just to see how things worked, to see what that apartment was like, how it actually functioned and how people really lived there. So that way I could tell what needed to be improved. I no longer had a tenant to ask and then tell me, oh, well, the key kind of gets stuck over here, and oh, the window over here is kind of broken, and hey, this light switch doesn't really work. I didn't have anybody to ask those questions to, as I was expecting, because I thought tenants were going to be in place. So to me, it was still important to go to still kind of look at that apartment and make sure to get it to, what else did I maybe need to call a handyman in for? You're right, we had to redo stairs. I think there was an appliance or two that like I changed out, but it was just really nice that I felt like I got to test, does the sink leak? Does the oven still heat up? Does the ceiling fan work? And that's what I thought was really important, and why I still chose to go to do those things. And that property was also in a different location than where I had bought before. So it was also me starting to kind of build a new team in a new location. But that's why I love that you came with me. And like I said, I think that was a great way. I feel like people reach out all the time being like, oh, like, let me like help you. And it's kind of like, but what can you do? Right? If you make a person's life easier, there's a greater chance of them to say, yeah, cool, come along. Let me show you how this works. So after that, you still planned on buying in New York at the time, if I remember correctly. What was that experience like when you first started looking in New York? Because I think, if I remember correctly, you were pretty close to either putting an offer in a place or buying a place in New York to start.
Yeah, there's been a lot of trial and error. So when I started looking in New York, like I said, I was raising Naya by myself. I didn't have any family out there. So I started looking in areas where I could afford something. So I actually started looking up in Yonkers. But the area that I was in, where I had actually almost put an offer in on the property. No, I think I did. I went as far as the inspection on that property. Yeah. And then I was just kind of thinking about, my long-term goals a little bit more. And it was only a condo. It wasn't like a multifamily, something that I had. Right. I had my mindset that I was going to buy a multifamily, but I'd have to have gone out to Connecticut for that. And for that, toward the end of it, I was like, if I'm moving this far out of the city, I might as well go back to Boston where I have support in my family. And I would have had to let go of Naya's babysitter at the time. It would have been like a
Yeah.
commute to work. So there was already so much that had changed in my life since I had Naya. And so I was like, do I really need to put myself through more stress? I don't know anybody up here. I'm probably not going to go down into the city often, like, should I remove myself from the only support that I do have, So yeah, I did go pretty far in that process. And then I think I just realized, like, what am I doing? Does this make sense? And I kind of had to, like, I think I was so excited just to get a property that I was grasping for anything that I could afford and that was there. And then I realized, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more patient. But I think I was so excited because I felt like I have been in the studying phase for so long. Now I'm finally here in the motion of it, right? And so I just wanted something. But yeah, I had to kind of sit back down and just kind of like recollect what my goals were, what I was looking for, and it just wasn't it, so.
I'm glad you did that though, because once again, travel was incredibly important to you and taking Naya to different places, right? Your biggest support system at the time was the babysitter that you had, and she was wonderful. She was such a sweetheart, and was there all the time, like was really like accessible. So that really kind of made a difference for you. Mm-hmm. And then also it was, like you said, it was a condo. It didn't have that rental component. So it wasn't aligned with not just your real estate goals. It really wasn't aligned with your life goals either. So I'm happy that you took that step back and thought that through, because I feel like too many people just kind of go with that pattern and just kind of get very caught up in that excitement and then just kind of keep going, and then all of a sudden end up buying something, and then 2-3 years later they're either stuck from a financial perspective, or they're unhappy because they're like, wait, but this doesn't fit my life goals. This doesn't fit my real estate goals. Where am I now, and how do I get back on track? And I feel like starting with those goals is incredibly important. So I'm glad you actually dialed back.
Yep.
And said, okay, something has to change.
And I don't know if you remember, but I texted you during that time. I said, Becky, does this make sense? And you didn't give me a yes or a no. I think you did say, does this align with your goals? And I took a step back again, and I was like, no. I knew the fact that you asked me such like a, if it was a yes, I felt like you would have been like, this is it, go for it. But I think the fact that you had me kind of take a step back and have me make the decision myself, like, I just knew it wasn't the right, but I thought that was a funny text. I'll never forget that.
Well, listen, one, as your friend, but two, also a person that does like real estate coaching for a living. Like, I don't really find my role to say, go buy this or don't go buy this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's not really up to me. I feel like my role is more to point out the things that I want to make sure that you see and make sure that you're making the right decisions for yourself. So yes, if I was like, Danielle, this is everything you've talked about, it's just your nerves, it makes perfect sense, I would have probably said something like that. Mm-hmm. But when I kind of more read your text in hesitation, and also I was sitting there being like, this is not what we've talked about for like years. And I think it would have worked out, but who knows in what way. But I felt like then you were kind of more ending up buying a home that you would be paying for rather than an investment. So that's why I was like, listen, like, if this makes her happy and this is the direction she wants to go, cool, go buy it. But also I felt like it was just important to kind of take a look at and say, is this really the thing that you were after the whole time? And that was a decision that only you knew the answer to. Mm-hmm. Right. And I say that as I'm sitting in a single family house. I never thought I would own a single family house.
Right.
Like, that was something that, like, thank you for saying that. But like, that was like a very like weird thing for me to kind of like move towards. And it was something that I had to keep like checking with my own goals of saying like, well, how is this going to affect my travel budget? How is this going to affect my lifestyle? Like, what differences are those going to make? So I'm glad that you did that at the same time. But that's funny that you remember that too, because I remember when you sent me that and I was like, I can't just write back a yes or no to this.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't think it didn't seem like it was just nerves, which is completely normal when you're buying your first property, to be like, oh my God, am I actually going to do this? And I was like, I think there's more to this this very simple, like one sentence text, I was like, I think there's a bit more to this than meets the eye in this message. So then you really kind of scrapped New York for a little while. Mm-hmm. What did you do next?
Yeah, so, I just I took some time. I did travel a little bit, which I think helped as well. And I just kind of tried to like realign with my goals, because I think where I was so stuck is I wanted to stay in New York so bad.
Yeah.
But my goals weren't there. I couldn't like propel forward. It would have taken me a long time, for me to get to where I wanted to. So I made the decision of moving back to Boston. I had actually spent like a few months of one of the summers back here. And I was like, it's just the right next move. It makes sense for everything I want to do. Things will be a lot easier and faster if I come here. So when my lease was up, I ended up, and also the rent increasing in New York helped me make that decision too.
Yep.
So then I decided to move back here. So I moved back here in December, almost 2 years ago now. Yep.
And where were you looking at the time during that move?
So I was looking in Haverhill, which is where my family is from. This area is really cool because it's pretty up and coming. And it had always been in the back of my mind. They always say to look for the cranes in the sky, right? So I always see them. They're always doing a ton of construction here. There's a bunch of like new buildings coming up. There's a lot of Amazon warehouses around. So I always kept my eye out, and I always knew it was kind of a good place. And my mom, my sister, everybody's here, So right. It kind of just made sense. So I started looking back here for multifamilies. Do you want me to get into this whole story now?
Yeah.
So I started looking for multifamilies. This area is great, but it also has a lot of old properties. So they were all built in like the 1800s, early 1900s. So we started looking at these multifamilies, and I started crunching the numbers to them, and we will go in. I would get all excited because the photos they post online were beautiful. We'd go in and everything was like a disaster. And I was like, this is going to need a lot of work, So we went through that process for a while. And then we finally found this 1-4 family, and we got really, I don't know if do you remember this property?
The 4, yes, I do. Okay.
So we got super close. We put in the offer. We got to the inspection again for this one, and we found out that it would need a new foundation, a new roof.
Yeah.
And then our unit would have had to been the one that we were going to live in would have had to have been renovated as well. So kind of something we would have had to, do pretty quickly. And, we had this realtor that I thought was going to be, pretty good. He was the owner of the real estate company and everything. And he was kind of trying to force us into buying it, which I think I have a pretty good sense of people typically. And, but not even just a sense, the numbers were right there. And I had, gone through the sheet that you provide, through Lady Landlords. I had gone through all the numbers, and then he started pulling up. He would bring us onto a Zoom and, do the numbers in front of us, and I'd be like, you're missing this, And so I started doing out the numbers myself, and with all of the renovations after the inspection was done, I told my sister, I was like, these are really big things. Like, where are we going to get all the money for this? So on paper, it looked beautiful. Like the numbers made sense. We would have been making, money, but then with all of the money, we would have had to funnel into it for all of all the repairs that needed to be done. We would have been losing so much money every month. And so the realtor my realtor kind of started getting a little bit mad at us. And he was like,
I remember that.
Answering me, you're not answering. And I was like, it doesn't make sense. And he's like, it makes sense. And he kind of started getting a little bit, and I said, no, I was like, this isn't the property for us. So we ended up backing out, which was, thank God we did that, because we would have, I don't know what would have happened financially. And I think it's kind of a good thing to know that even though you find someone that's your realtor, and this was a family friend, so it's not someone who was far removed, I think it's just important to find someone who really can be on your side and wants you to succeed,
Yeah.
And doesn't just want the sale, because it was a pretty big sale, but it didn't, we would have been totally screwed,
Yeah. I did not like how he was talking to you. I did not like the pressure that was put on you. It ended up being a much larger project. I mean, some people might be a little bit young for this, but it reminded me of the movie like The Money Pit, where it was just like, there were large issues with that. And that was also something that you would be living in, right? And that I think made like a huge difference. And I felt it was a ton of pressure. So I think you made a great point there that we have to remember all realtors are not created equal. Some they are salespeople at the end of the day, right? But we also have to have the education. I love the fact that you were like, some of the resources that we have at Lady Landlords, that you were able to kind of go through and we're like, you're missing this number. Nope, you're missing this number, rather than just kind of saying, because I've seen that, and realtors are not investors. Realtors can absolutely still invest on the side. Maybe they have their own rental properties. That is absolutely a possibility. But not all realtors have that experience of working with investors. Not all realtors are in the space of education, have the time, the patience, the know-how to go through those things. And it sounds like that was just happened to be the realtor that you found, completely compounded by the fact that, once again, a family friend, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And that's usually why, as much as we love our family and our friends, sometimes working with people we know is not a good idea, because it's then adds another layer of complication to then have to separate and devise from that. One thing you said in here that you skipped over, I want to go back to. You said my sister. So how did it come about that you and your sister were going to partner up on that first property?
I convinced her that it would be really no. She was living in an apartment at the time. She had wanted to buy a property for a long time, and she hated the apartment she was living in. So it was kind of an easy sell. So I was like, I have a great idea. We'll buy I really was set on buying a multifamily out here. So I was like, if we go in on it together, like we can afford something, or I thought we could afford a multifamily out here. It was pretty easy for me to kind of get her on board, I think, just because she wanted to buy a property so bad too.
Right. I feel like you were still more on the investment side. She was more on the I need a home side.
Yep.
But it still worked out. And going back to that idea of aligning with goals, it met her goals. Yep. It met your goals. So walked away from the house that was going to crumble down.
Yep. And good thing, because it was taken off the market and never put back on again. So
interesting.
Yep.
There's always a story behind things like that. So I'm always kind of curious with like what happened with things like that. But some things I will just never know. So you walked away from that property. I think that was hard too. Because now you had the one in New York that you'd walked away from. Now you had this multifamily that you had walked away from. And also it's hard when a person in the position of an expert tells you, oh no, this is a good deal. Oh, you should do this.
He was an investor too. So it made it even more difficult, because I felt like I was kind of going against like, oh, this guy, he owns a lot of properties, and I said, no, but I'll be honest, it was because of all the knowledge that I had from Lady Landlords, from doing the mentorship program for so long, and kind of just having y'all as support too. Like I knew I could come back and get some like solid advice, and not just, it is kind of, because I knew I couldn't rely on him for that, so yeah.
Right. And I'll be honest, even now with 17 properties, full-time real estate investor for myself, I still have other investors that are much bigger than me, or even if they aren't, that will like tell me about like an opportunity or an idea. And they're like, oh, well, like you'd be like dumb not to invest in this. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. That has nothing to do with my strategy, my goals, my lifestyle, my plan, how I like to run my financial household. There are opportunities that I turn down all the time because they just aren't fits for me. Yeah. And I guarantee you, just probably like that realtor, I have some of these people probably look at me being like, oh my God, why would she not like go for that? But it's just like, but want to know what? Like, I don't want to own this thing in this area that just doesn't fit for me, with this plan, this pay schedule, whatever it may be, that doesn't work for me. We don't have to say yes to everything, but does it make it hard when they're kind of in that authority position? So I'm really glad that you had that knowledge and that confidence to really kind of push back and be like, I actually don't think this one is for me. Maybe that would have been a good deal for him.
Yeah.
It's his experience and what he's in the past and other flips that he's done and his connections to foundation people. But that wasn't right for you and your sister with kids that needed a place to move into that would be safe for a 4-year-old. So you walked away. You bit the bullet, you walked away. Then what happened?
Okay, so then we continued our search. Mind you, I'm living with my mom right now because we had moved back to, from New York. So I was not dying to get out because I love living with her, but like I had been on my own for a long time. So I was ready to just kind of get back into my, my own place again. So we kept looking. And one day I was sitting there and I was like, I have to sit down again and like refocus, I think. So I said to my sister, I was like, why don't we start looking for single family properties that maybe need some TLC? And so I changed my, all of my real estate apps to single families, not change them, but I added single families onto our, search criteria. And I started looking for, just some properties that needed some fixing up. So we actually, the house that we ended up buying, it ended up being the first single family home we looked at. And it was, like I said, all these homes were built a long time ago. And one of the major problems I think that we have found is that with a lot of the multifamily properties, this area that we're in probably used to be like a C, maybe even D class neighborhood. So the owners and the tenants kind of kept the property's condition wasn't that great for the multifamilies either. So we were kind of running into that time and time again. So every property, even if the numbers worked, since they needed so much work, it just wasn't working. So anyways, that's why we kind of refocused onto, single family homes. So so we found this property and we came in and the owners have been here for 58 years and there was wallpaper everywhere. It was just very outdated, but it was in perfect condition. Like everything else was it was just a beautiful house. But I knew that there was some places where I could add value, which was important for me because I said, if I'm going to give up the multifamily, I'm not going to give up everything, And throughout the years, I had kind of learned like what sort of properties you look for if you're looking to add value. So the property only has like one bathroom on the second floor, but there's a space we can add it on the first floor. So that's one thing that we have, in mind. We tore down all the wallpaper. There's horsehair plasters, so we're like compounding everything, painting everything. There's also that we could definitely fix up the top floor for if we wanted to add, a tenant to live here. We could definitely add like another not property, but space up there for them. The basement also would allow for that. Like the windows are big enough where it would be a legal, live-in basement. So that's another option. So there's a lot of, I just tried to make sure that no matter what property we got, there would be a lot of options because where I had run into so many, I think, blockades, I just wanted to make sure that no matter what I did, I'd be able to like select what I wanted to do going forward.
It's kind of like, I don't know if you had read those books when you were a kid, but like the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah.
It could be like, okay, add tenant to the upstairs. No, finish the basement. No, move out, pull out a ton of equity because you had value add areas. Yep. It sounds like you gave yourself a lot of options for exit strategies that would work, that didn't compromise the vision that you originally set out, which was to purchase an investment property.
Yeah, and something else that I realized recently is we actually have enough space in the yard where we wouldn't have to get rid of the whole yard because, of course, I have a 4-year-old, but we actually have enough space on our side yard to even put a tiny home that already has a driveway to it and everything. So if we didn't want a tenant inside the house, we have that as well. So there's a lot of different, so that it's like kind of exciting because it's definitely not what I had envisioned when I thought about real estate investing initially. But I think it was kind of cool how you can go about it in so many different ways, but you have to be okay to walk away, sadly, because there was some tears shed, but.
Of course, especially when this was something that you've wanted for so long. Like I said, now you're kind of going against, somebody that, once again, is that authority figure. Think about telling like a doctor, when the white coat syndrome, right? To say no to a doctor in a white coat is very hard for people to do. It's the same thing here. You're hiring an expert, a realtor, an authority figure to guide you. And now all of a sudden you're disagreeing with that person. That adds a whole nother level to it. And this was something that you've wanted for a long time. And you were taking all the right actions. And it just didn't come together until this property and a little bit of a shift there. With that discouragement of walking away from the place in New York, we didn't get into it, and that'll be for another time, but you were also looking in Philly for a little while because you still wanted to stay in Brooklyn. Yeah. And at least Philly was then still closer at a more affordable place rather than looking at some of the other places in New York. Then you started looking at Massachusetts, walked away from that one. you kind of were hit with obstacle, 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 obstacle. What kept you going that made you say, oh, maybe this real estate thing just isn't for me?
I think I just know what I want. I know what I want for my life. And I know that me working a typical job every single day, I don't want to do that till I'm 65, 70 years old. It's
Right.
not meant for me or Naya. Like, we love to travel. There's a lot of different passions that I have. Sadly, I had to leave my nonprofit career once I had Naya because I couldn't make enough money with that job. But like I said, I love to do volunteer work and help out with the community. Raising a daughter myself, I don't have the time to do anything that I really want to do myself, And so it's really important for me to be able to create that life for myself. And real estate was the way that I figured out I could do that, And so I want to live like a different life. I don't want to just live a standard, 9 to 5. I don't want Naya to live that. I want more, and I think that's what kept me going.
And you two both deserve that.
Yeah.
So I love watching all your adventures. So if you'd be open to, I'd love if you could just share a little bit of what you and Naya have been able to do, places you've been able to go, where you've been able to live now with having kind of real estate kicking off and getting going.
Yeah, so Naya's 4. She's traveled to 9 countries already. We're gonna actually be going on a trip to do some volunteer work out. I think we're gonna go, debating between Peru and Guatemala, but for the new year. So we'll go and do some volunteer work out there for the holidays. We lived in Portugal for a month. She's done like a school based out in Portugal, and yeah, she's been everywhere. She's so cool.
And she always looks so happy in all of these different places.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? For me, time is the most important thing. Once I had her, I always loved having a job and telling people what I did for work, and kind of, I think you get that set in your head when you live in America that you're supposed to grind and that's all there is to life, but there's so much more to it, and Naya made me realize that. And I know that like real estate can give me that time. And I don't think there's anything else that can give me the time like that. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for, is that time, the freedom, the flexibility. And so I plan to take Naya everywhere, and I just don't want to be stuck, And I think even though I felt stuck in some situations when I was getting the properties, I know that wasn't it. It was just like for the time, right? I'd rather be stuck in like a season than I would rather be stuck my whole life,
Right. And that to me has actually been something that inspired me even years ago when we met, that you said, no, like wherever I go, like Naya's going to come. You've always treated her as like a full adult with being like, no, I'm going to go to Asia. Of course, my 3-year-old is going to come to Asia. And of course, this is what she's going to eat. And of course, this is how it's going to go. And I've always thought that was really cool. And now the fact that I'm starting a family, I love the fact that I can say, no, this baby is going to have a passport before it can sit up, and I'm going to be okay with that. And it's helped me be able to say, since I still plan on going to the Dominican Republic for the winter, as I do annually, a lot of people have been, when they found out that I was pregnant, they were like, oh, I guess, you have to give that up. And because of you, I've been able to say, no, that's actually was part of the plan. Like we kind of did this because our kid's coming with us. And that's the experiences that I want to be able to do. I still have bookmarked that Portugal school that you took Naya to, because I know they had other locations. I still have that bookmarked in my email, because that was something that was really important to me, was to also have a little bit of a traditional life, an untraditional lifestyle moving forward, because that was important to me. So maybe I thank you for that.
Yeah, we can go to do some cohorts together.
Sold.
Can you imagine?
But Danielle, thank you very much. Thank you for being so open and just kind of sharing your story. Last question I have for you is, where do you go from here? What's next for you on your real estate journey?
Yeah, I think since I've had to move my mind around so many times within real estate, I haven't focused in solely on one thing. What I really want to get into, I think, honestly, is private money lending, just because I realize that my time is super important. And even though I know you make a little bit less back, I think time-wise, I think that would be important for me. So yeah, I'm hoping actually that whatever equity we make with this property, I can just kind of funnel into private money lending and just start there. So I've got to start my journey again, learning more about it and doing the research and everything. But I think for the next year or so, we'll probably be still trying to finish this property and, do all of our renovations. So,
And that's the typical cycle that I feel like we have as real estate investors is buy, work on property, get it settled, sometimes take a little bit of a break in between there, and then kind of get going again. And lucky for you, we actually have a private money lending episode coming up here on the Lady Landlords podcast.
Oh, perfect.
So perfect timing, Danielle.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today. And we'll have to have you back on and have a little bit of a part 2 down the line as you move into this next phase for real estate investing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
For all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us today. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. We release new episodes every single Tuesday. And if you enjoyed today's episode, and I know you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. That helps other women investors find our community and realize that they are not alone while growing their portfolio. Thank you so much, and see you next week on the Lady Landlords podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.